I was 8 years old the first time the skies turned violet. My father declared it the last straw before everything as we knew it changed for good. My memory is hazy, but I recall standing in the front yard of our modest bunker house, the leftover rays of sunlight piercing through a violet haze so intense that the world seemed drenched in grape-colored ink. Neighbors emerged from their comforting darkness, shielding their eyes with rough cloth or tinted goggles. My mother muttered worried curses under her breath. She feared that tomorrow would bring a shade of the sky we would not be able to survive. Back then, none of us understood the full scope of what was happening. By the following morning, the skies turned pale yellow, a sickly, sulfuric hue. The flowers in our yard had grown large pink bulbs overnight, and my father's beloved whippet dog had grown a second, smaller tail. Such was the new reality we had to learn to accept. At the core of our settlement was a belief that each day's sky color was not random. We had no instrument sophisticated enough to measure changes in atmospheric composition, nor any official scientists left to interpret it. Years of war, famine, and social upheaval had already claimed most academics and researchers. Civilization braced itself the best it could after those first shifts violet to yellow to mossy green within a mere span of days. Everyone realized that this was not a temporary glitch in nature. It was the beginning of something we had never witnessed before, and we all began to adapt in our own ways. The changes in the flora and fauna sprang forth with both miraculous and terrifying speed. We might go to bed after seeing bright orange skies and wake up to find twisted grasses with razor-like edges. While it was fascinating to some, especially the children who would collect odd blossoms and present them as trophies, it was terrifying for the adults who had to figure out how to keep us fed and safe. When the sky turned navy blue, the birds we had grown accustomed to seeing each morning mutated into bizarre creatures with extra limbs or eyes. Lost dogs would reappear with scaly patches along their necks and glowing eyes that made them nearly unrecognizable. And then there were the crops. Arable land was scarce even before this phenomenon, but now it changed shape unpredictably. One day sturdy corn might appear feasible, only to transform into fibrous red stalks the next, inedible or even poisonous. Despite this living nightmare, the settlement that formed around the old underground transit station thrived in a precarious way. We carved an existence out of the leftover tunnels and storage vaults. Each family occupied a compartment that had once been used for storing ammunition or train equipment. Being partially underground gave us a slight advantage. It reduced the direct exposure to the daily sky changes. Even so, nothing could halt the infiltration of mutated spores, insects, and creeping vines. I remember how the watchmen scouted at dawn from the highest vantage point, a defunct signal tower. They reported changes in atmospheric color about an hour before sunrise actually lit the horizon. If we awakened and heard footsteps pounding down the corridor, we knew the watchman had spotted something particularly menacing, perhaps a noxious pink or a boiling black haze. Indeed, some days were worse than others. On the day I reached 16, the sky was a mesmerizing shade of turquoise that shimmered in and out of silver. I crawled out of my bunk and made my way to the supply chamber, which lay outside the main station. My mother was already up, finishing her morning chores. She gave me a nod to indicate I should continue while she tested a new water purification method. She'd rigged up a contraption made of salvaged plastic and jeans, the denim acting as a rudimentary filter. We had to try anything to remain alive. I tugged on my boots and stepped outside into the turquoise glow. The world was eerily silent except for the rustling hush of changing flora. Where yesterday thin, brownish creepers had lined the fence, now they had turned a translucent green with black spots. Reaching out, I touched one leaf, watching a spurt of pale liquid drip from its tip. A neighbor's cat slunk by. I recognized it from previous sightings. It had started out with pale white fur, but now boasted stripes of lavender and silver along its flanks. I offered some scraps of dried meat, half expecting it to hiss due to the changes. Instead, it cautiously stepped forward, eyes shifting from the usual feline glow to something tinted with deep maroon. As it ate, I studied it with an odd mixture of fascination and dread. With the cat fed, I continued along the perimeter fence and out into the open farmland. Once upon a time, this acreage had been a massive orchard. Now, only remnants of twisted trunks and vines littered the ground. Even so, it was crucial that we scavenge for anything remotely edible or potentially medicinal. This was how I discovered patches of mushrooms or finger-sized tubers that might be turned into soup if thoroughly boiled. The risk was that, on a day when the sky changed from turquoise to blazing crimson in the afternoon, those same mushrooms might become toxic. I gathered a small sack of tubers and was about to head home when I heard a low growl. The turquoise shimmer in the air made shapes look gelatinous at the edges, so it was difficult to see where the threat lay. My heart pounded, and I carefully scanned the horizon. A figure lumbered through the undergrowth of mutated weeds. The creature was dog-sized but covered in glistening insect-like armor. Ugly spines jutted from its back. I wasn't sure if it was a mammal, reptile, or an unholy combination. It had a wide mouth lined with rows of tiny, chattering teeth. The knowledge that something like this might have been a harmless stray dog yesterday sent a pang of pity through me, followed by a surge of fear for my life. Clutching my sack of tubers, I slowly retreated, but the creature's head swiveled in my direction, and it let out a throaty gurgle. My rational side told me the mutated beasts we encountered each day were as confused as we were, but that did little to dampen my terror when it began to gallop toward me. I turned and ran. My legs churned through the spongy dirt, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The station's silhouette loomed in the distance, a squat fortress of metal and concrete. My focus narrowed on the battered double doors. If I could just make it through them, I might have a chance. Heavy footfalls gained on me, and I half expected a needle-toothed maw to clamp down on my calf. Adrenaline propelled me. As I reached the station door, I barreled through. I heard a dull thud as the creature slammed into the metal behind me, claws screeching. I stumbled, trying to slam the bar from the inside. It took 2 attempts, but the door was secure, and I could breathe again. To my relief, no one was immediately in the corridor watching me struggle. I found it easier to slip back into a semblance of calm without an audience. After a moment, I heard faint knocking from the other side of the door. The beast eventually gave up. My muscles slowly unclenched, and I walked away, pressed the tubers into the arms of a startled guard, and collapsed onto a nearby cot in an empty corner. That was our life now. A daily routine of adrenaline, fear, and small triumphs like securing an extra handful of supplies. That night, word spread among the settlement that the watchman expected an exceptionally vibrant color change by morning. People whispered in hallways, anticipating or dreading what might happen. Our leaders, all self-appointed, mostly older folks who had proven their competence, assembled in the main atrium to form a contingency plan. Whispers of scarlet fog or obsidian dawn passed from mouth to mouth. The general consensus was that we should be prepared for anything as soon as daylight struck. My mother's job was to keep water supplies as clean as possible under all conditions. If the coming sky color would be a hazard to the reservoir, she had to plan accordingly. She rummaged through tattered notebooks and half-broken equipment, trying to figure out how to cover the open reservoir tanks. My father was primarily a scavenger. He went out whenever it was safe to gather tools, seeds, or items that might offer us a chance at progress. Now, though, we both knew that no single skill set would be enough to protect us from rapidly mutating creatures and the unstoppable changes in the environment. Even our best minds, such as they were, continued to gather only partial knowledge about the phenomenon. That evening, I joined half a dozen other settlement members in the atrium, studying the posted mutation board. Our rudimentary attempts at science involved describing each day's sky color, preferably with leftover paint chips from a hardware store, and listing the most significant changes we observed in local flora and fauna. Certain patterns emerged. For instance, when the sky displayed variations of purple or deep violet, animals tended to sprout new limbs or organs. When it was red or orange, most changes affected plants, often intensifying their toxicity or forcing them to grow in bizarre shapes. Green and turquoise days seemed unpredictable, resulting in a mixture of beneficial and harmful mutations. Yellow shades were known for unpredictable bursts of growth. We even recorded a day of black haze during which something about the atmosphere caused metal objects to rapidly corrode. as if rust had spawned from the air itself. The board was plastered with color swatches, scribbled notes, sketches of mutated plants, and warnings about certain creatures. It was a somber testament to how drastically life had changed. Sometimes, I allowed myself to daydream about what life might have been like before the atmosphere started shifting. We'd inherit weather transitions, sunny to cloudy, overcast to stormy. But now, the notion of a stable sky seemed more fantastical than flying ships or subterranean palaces of gold. Maybe that was why none of us had yet given up. On some level, we still held the impossibly desperate hope that the phenomenon would stop, that one day the sky would shift back to a consistent blue. That was the last dream of normalcy we clung to. I rose before dawn, disoriented by the swirling nightmares that had haunted my sleep. My father was up, methodically preparing for a scouting run. He adjusted a heavy steel bracer on his left forearm, a battered piece of equipment that might protect him if he encountered a clawed creature. His face was set in grim determination, knowing full well how risky the day might be. I stepped close and quietly offered to accompany him. Blinking in surprise, he seemed torn. "It could be dangerous," he warned, "but I might need an extra set of eyes." We quietly agreed to leave as soon as the watchers signaled the color shift. We waited near the door until the corridor filled with tense murmuring. Then a runner burst in. "It's a deep crimson," she yelled, panting. "Very bright, and it started to flicker with gold." A hush fell over those in earshot. Several braced themselves for potential attacks from newly mutated creatures, but I also noticed a glimmer of hope. On red days, the vegetation changed drastically. On the plus side, we might find new plant varieties that could help us survive. My father exchanged a quick look with me, nodded, and we set out together. Once we emerged, we saw the sky painted in a mesmerizing tapestry of red with golden undertone. The air hummed with static-like energy, and the hair on my arms prickled. The ground underfoot seemed to swell with rapid plant growth. Thin tendrils sprang up in real time, curling around small rocks as though they had minds of their own. Seed pods burst open in the distance, spilling black seeds onto the earth. My father readied himself. "We need to be quick," he said. "Let's secure anything edible and mark potential dangers." We crept forward, scanning for any mushrooms, tubers, or vines that might be safe to harvest. I spotted a patch of bright red leaves shaped like jagged triangles. Droplets of dew glistened on their surface in a shade I'd never seen before, somewhere between green and silver. My father handed me a small container. "Collect a sample carefully," he instructed. Using thick gloves, I snipped off 2 leaves and placed them inside. Right away, flecks of golden light seemed to dance across their surfaces. Overhead, the sky's color pulsated between red and gold. My father crouched down to examine a patch of wavy mushrooms that had sprouted in neon pink. He shook his head. "Might be too risky. They could release toxic spores." We moved on, stepping over twisted roots pushing up through the earth like restless fingers. We had ventured all of half a mile from the station's perimeter fence when I saw something that stopped my heart. A cluster of small, bright orbs jutting from the trunk of a half-dead tree. They looked almost like pomegranates crossed with glowing marbles. As we neared, my father raised a cautious hand, but curiosity pulled me closer. One of the orbs had split open, revealing a slick interior and seeds shaped like miniature pearls. The entire cluster pulsed with a subtle luminescence. I recalled from our mutation logs that new fruit could be a nutritional jackpot, or a dreadful poison. My father rummaged for a test kit, a makeshift device that would let us submerge a small part of the fruit in a chemical solution to see if it clouded. If the sample remained clear, we'd at least know it wasn't overtly deadly. I carefully removed part of the fruit's interior with a small scalpel, then I placed it into the test vial. My father shook it gently, waiting for a color change. For a moment, the liquid hinted at a swirl of pink, but then it settled back to clear. We exchanged glances. "Let's not get too optimistic," he cautioned. "We'll do more tests back at the station." I nodded, storing the entire cluster in a padded container. The possibility of having something edible felt like a monumental victory. Our moment of triumph didn't last. A strangled snarl erupted from behind a fallen log. My father and I froze. We watched as two elongated shapes, something akin to large possums but sporting bony protrusions from their spines, crept into view. Their eyes glowed with the same shimmering gold as the sky's undertones. One hissed, revealing jagged teeth. Slowly we inched backward. I gripped a short spear, an improvised weapon we all carried for defense. My father raised his bracer. The creatures advanced, spurred on by the flickering sky. Their spines rattled in the crisp morning air. Before we could make a move, the larger of the two creatures lunged, claws splaying. My father braced himself, raising his forearm to block. The blow sent him staggering. I jabbed with the spear, but the creature twisted away, letting out an otherworldly screech. Meanwhile, the second possum-like beast circled me. Fear rippled through me as I realized we were flanked. My father recovered enough to swing a small blade at the first attacker, slicing across its hide. It reared back, shrieking in pain, and black ichor oozed from the wound. I tried not to think about the potential toxicity of that fluid. We only had one priority: surviving. The second beast launched at me, spines rattling like warning bells. I ducked, thrusting my spear upward. A sickening crunch made my stomach lurch. The creature skewered, let out a loud, painful rasp before it went limp. With a trembling arm, I pulled the spear free. My father engaged the other beast, struggling as it clamped onto the edge of his bracer with tooth and claw. He managed to brace its neck with his free hand and slammed it into the trunk of a twisted tree. The creature's spine snapped. It emitted a final, dying hiss. Then it slid to the ground. Breathing heavily, we looked at each other, neither of us quite believing we had survived. We gathered the containers of samples as quickly as possible, anxious to return to the station before anything else attacked. All around us, bizarre shapes continued to sprout from the transformed Earth. We forced ourselves not to linger. Once back inside, the station's residents buzzed with curiosity. Younger children peered from behind crates and boxes, wide-eyed at the sight of black blood spattered on our clothing. An older man fetched us both water and offered to help with analyzing the fruit. We declined for the moment, preferring to do it ourselves quietly. The thick tension that had built during our outing needed time and introspection to dissipate. In the cramped storage chamber where my mother kept her purification equipment, we gently opened the container of pulsating fruit. Now that we were indoors, we noticed that the fruit glowed more subtly. My mother performed an additional series of tests, dipping it in various solutions, checking for reactions. Every step remained inconclusive, but also not outright dangerous. Eventually, we cut open a small piece, boiled it alongside a typical ration crop in a pot, and tested a minuscule sample on a lab rat we maintained for these experiments. The rat sniffed the boiled fruit, took a few tentative nibbles, and continued nibbling with no ill effects that we could see. An hour later, it still seemed fine, even showing a bit more energy as it scurried around its enclosure. My mother was cautiously optimistic. She and my father tested the fruit themselves in a similar manner, extremely small amounts, boiled thoroughly. Again, there were no immediate negative reactions. My father turned to me, nodding ever so slightly. By evening, we had enough confidence to share the news with the settlement. The new fruit had the potential to be cultivated if it remained stable across different sky colors. A ripple of excitement passed through the corridors, overshadowing the daily dread we usually faced. Some residents took clippings and seeds, attempting to plant them in small pots under the station's artificial lights. Others devised ways to preserve or ferment tiny pieces of the fruit for future use. Still, no one dared to proclaim the phenomenon had been conquered. We all knew that one unpredictable color shift could destroy or mutate this promising new food source. 3 days passed with the sky morphing from mallard green to a swirling silver blue, and then to a dull, muddy brown. Each shift brought new curiosity. One day, huge insects with metallic wings fluttered among the mutated vines, pollinating them in ways we had never seen. Another day, an outbreak of a spore-like virus forced us to quarantine an entire section of the station until we could decontaminate it. Yet in those 3 days, the fruit we harvested remained stable, at least in storage. The seeds sprouted quickly in the artificial lights, growing small vines with red-veined leaves. Our settlement collectively held its breath. My father reacted by redoubling his scavenging trips, searching for tools and materials that might help us farm indoors more effectively. My mother combined her water purification talents with a newfound interest in controlling soil acidity. The result was a makeshift agricultural cell, no larger than a typical living space, but rigged with lights and simple climate control devices. Despite these efforts, we remained in constant vigilance. Messengers scurried through corridors at dawn each day to warn of the sky's color, and potential threats inevitably followed. To our shock and relief, the cluster of vines bearing the red, luminescent fruit seemed unaffected by some of the wilder transformations in the sky. The seeds we planted became a beacon of hope. Families began volunteering time to help mother the seedlings, singing old lullabies as if the plants could hear them. My father built a simpler harness for his bracer and used leftover scrap metal to form a stable enclosure for the sprouts. And day by day, we started to see the faint glimmer of a future, however uncertain and precarious, that might allow us to gather the strength to endure. It was on the morning the sky turned a gentle rose pink that we realized something remarkable about these plants. The watchers noticed only minimal changes in local flora, but our new vines blossomed with small pearlescent flowers. We tested their nectar using the same cautious approach we used on the fruits and found it safe, more than safe actually. It showed signs of being nutritionally rich, perhaps even fortifying. Our battered settlement had discovered a rare path to something beyond mere survival, a chance at revival. That isn't to say tragedy stopped knocking at our doors. Each day we lost one or more of our community to an unlucky encounter with a rampaging beast, or a spore-laden drift that arrived too quickly. Some people simply fell ill from unknown toxins. The phenomenon still demanded a price. Yet the selfless efforts of those who harnessed the bizarre transformations offered renewed spirits. A skeleton of advanced knowledge began to form, with each sky color meticulously recorded, each observed mutation cataloged. We started to dream. Perhaps one day we might locate others beyond our region who'd made similar strides. We might form a network of travelers and eventually reclaim patches of the world with stable, life-sustaining ecosystems. Now, at the age of 19, I stand atop the defunct signal tower each morning for my watch. The horizon never fails to surprise me, bathing us in a new color that sparks its own transformations in every living thing. When the sun begins its ascent, I can see brilliant streaks of turquoise or saffron or rust swirling through the cloud cover. The new plants in our agricultural chamber continue to grow, their luminescent fruits forming an unorthodox orchard beneath fluorescent lights. And while I know the next day's sky could unleash horrors beyond imagination, I also hold on to the knowledge that we have prepared as best we can. Though the soil morphs and the beasts mutate, we are learning to adapt, to collect seeds of opportunity in the face of uncertainty. Each morning, when I climb down from my vantage point to report the day's coloration, I hear the faint hum of hope in the station corridors, families stirring, children rubbing sleep from their eyes, older residents gathering for a meal. Our nourishment still contains the old world's grains and dried goods, but now we blend in our new fruit, our future lifeblood. In some ways, the daily color changes have even become part of our spiritual tapestry, reminding us of the fragile balance in nature's mysteries. We do not dwell on the sins that led civilization to this condition, nor do we pretend that some sudden miracle will occur. Instead, we work, piece by piece, to forge a life that can withstand whatever shade the sky presents. There are days when a flicker of fear resurfaces, when a menacing beast prowls too close to our fences, or when the sky burns in a color that sets our hearts racing with old nightmares. But each time we push forward, armed with love for one another and the small discoveries we have accrued. We have come to understand that survival isn't a one-time accomplishment. It is an ongoing dance with the unknown. For every color that envelops our world, we find a way to test its potential gifts and guard ourselves against its curses. I often wonder if, somewhere beyond the horizon, other pockets of humanity thrive under these kaleidoscopic skies. I imagine they, too, observe and adapt, forging alliances with the uncertain flavors of nature itself. Over time, maybe we will find a way to link settlements, sharing seeds and revelations. Until then, we stand watch. We study our daily color-coded destiny, and we harvest whatever gifts it offers us. Our silent promise to one another is that we will not simply brace ourselves for the next mutation, we will learn from it, shape it to our advantage if we can, and carry on in the face of ongoing upheavals. So we greet each sunrise with more caution than excitement, unsure of the atmosphere's trick and what new twists it might bring. Yet we choose to keep living, keep sowing seeds and bridging fragile alliances where possible, refusing to bow to the swirling thread overhead. Our existence is woven out of unpredictability. In the wake of shifting skies, we bloom in defiance. And that, in this ever-changing world, is the closest thing to hope we have left.